What would you do, if your 4-year-old suddenly said something that challenged everything you believed in? It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't even a launch failure. It was a Tuesday morning. Elon Musk sat in his favorite chair, nestled in the quiet of his Bel Air home sunroom, a rare moment of silence wrapping around him like a weighted blanket. Outside, hummingbirds zipped through the California air. Inside, he stared down at a half-eaten piece of toast, eyes unfocused, lips parted slightly, like he'd just been punched by a ghost. In the background, the gentle hum of a child's voice filled the room. "Daddy," his 4-year-old son had asked only moments earlier, "are you trying to save the world so you don't have to fix the people in it?" And just like that, Elon Musk, man of Mars, builder of electric empires, the tech world's Iron Man, was speechless. He didn't know what to say. No answer formed. His mind, usually bursting with equations and contingency plans, was still blank. This wasn't a press conference. This wasn't an investor Q&A. This was his son. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It had started out like any other day. Elon had returned from Texas the night before, fresh off a visit to the Boca Chica launch site. The Starship prototype test had gone mostly as expected, mostly being a generous word. He hadn't slept much, as usual. The late-night emails, the calls with Shanghai, the deep, endless internal questioning about humanity's place among the stars, all of it churned through his brain like static. He was used to being exhausted. That wasn't new. What was new, was how different things felt now that X, his 4-year-old son, was talking more. Asking more. Saying strange, profound things that lingered in Elon's chest long after the words were spoken. That morning, the boy had wandered into the sunroom wearing a faded NASA sweatshirt, dragging a stuffed robot behind him. His hair was a chaotic mess, eyes bright like little galaxies. He stood by the glass door and watched the sunlight drip onto the tiled floor. "Do you ever miss Earth when you're not here?" he asked innocently. Elon had blinked. "What do you mean, bud?" "I saw a rocket video. You weren't here. I was sad. Mommy said you were helping the world. But I was still sad." He paused. "Is that why you make rockets? So you don't have to stay where it's hard?" And then came the line. The one that stopped time. "Are you trying to save the world so you don't have to fix the people in it?" Elon didn't answer. Couldn't. There wasn't a code to crack, or a formula to explain that away. He looked at his son, this strange, beautiful little human, and for once, the man who spoke in TED Talks and press briefings, who fired people with a sentence, who broke the rules of industry and gravity, had no words. When people talked about Elon Musk, they talked about ambition. Disruption. Innovation. They talked about his Mars obsession, his war with Twitter, his memes, his enemies, his billions. What they didn't talk about, was this moment. The one where a 4-year-old unintentionally cracked open the chest of the world's most famous futurist and showed him something he'd forgotten how to see, the present. Because for all his intelligence, all his power, all his vision of what the future could be, Elon had rarely stopped to ask what the future should feel like. Not until now. Not until that question. And somewhere, deep inside, a part of him whispered. What if he's right? Later that day, after the silence and toast, Elon canceled a call with his engineering team. He said he had a migraine. He didn't. He just couldn't concentrate. He kept replaying the conversation in his head like a broken tape. That one question, that single, innocent question, echoed louder than the sound of rocket engines. Was his son accusing him? Or simply observing? Did he even understand the depth of what he'd said? Probably not. But that didn't make it any less powerful. Kids were like that. They saw what adults missed. Said what adults avoided. Elon remembered reading somewhere that children's brains were like truth magnets. No filters. Just raw, honest logic mixed with emotion. It was beautiful. And brutal. He stood by the window, looking out at the skyline, wondering if all his companies, all his inventions, had simply been a way to control the uncontrollable. To shape chaos into order. To fix the universe, while avoiding the messiness of being a human in a world full of broken people. He had always framed his mission as survival. Preservation. Expansion. But what if survival without connection was just escape? Back in the sunroom, the boy had gone back to playing. A line of toy rockets snaked across the floor. One of them had Earth 2.0 scribbled on the side in crayon. X didn't know it yet, but he had just rerouted a piece of his father's emotional trajectory. No charts. No stock prices. No trending hashtags. Just a small voice, asking a big question. Not with a launch. Not with a scandal. But with a question. A 4-year-old's question that left Elon Musk speechless. And that silence. It may have been the most important sound of his life. Before the question, before the stillness and the toast, before a 4-year-old cracked open his core, Elon Musk was already unraveling. Not in a dramatic, public meltdown kind of way. No paparazzi photos. No explosive tweets. Just, quiet fragmentation. The kind only a man like him could endure without anyone noticing. Because from the outside, he was still winning. Tesla's stock was soaring. SpaceX had just completed a successful crewed mission to the ISS, Neuralink had shown early promise with its primate trials. Investors called him visionary. Followers called him a god. Haters called him a narcissist. But none of them saw the man who stared at the ceiling every night from 2 to 5 a.m., replaying conversations he didn't have time for. None of them heard the echo of silence when he opened the front door to an empty house. The truth? Elon Musk was tired. And not just tired. Bone deep, soul-scorched, existentially drained. He hadn't meant for life to turn out like this. Not exactly. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, he'd always been the weird kid. Brilliant, awkward, obsessed with books and code. The kind of kid who read encyclopedias for fun. The kind who never quite fit in, at home, at school, in his own skin. His father, Elon Musk, was a complicated man, charismatic and cruel in the same breath. Elon rarely spoke about him. When he did, the words were cold, clipped, like shrapnel he'd long since learned to step over. He'd left South Africa at 17, chased the dream of Silicon Valley like it was oxygen. First Canada, then the US, sleeping on couches, eating cheap noodles, coding like a man possessed. And in a way, he was. Possessed by the idea that if he worked hard enough, dreamed big enough, escaped fast enough, he could outrun the pain. And it worked. Sort of. He sold Zip2. Made millions. Built PayPal. Made more. Launched Tesla. Created SpaceX. Dreamed of Mars. Each new company was a rung on the ladder. Each success, a step away from whatever haunted him in the rearview mirror. And yet, no matter how high he climbed, he never stopped looking back. Elon wasn't a villain. He wasn't a saint either. He was a man trying to do something so absurdly impossible that it required sacrificing things others wouldn't dare. Like sleep. Like relationships. Like peace. He was used to being misunderstood. But what hurt, what really stung, was when the misunderstanding came from the people closest to him. From his children. From X. He'd been through divorces. Public breakups. Custody battles. A child lost to SIDS when he was just a baby, Nevada, his first son. That grief never fully healed. It just buried itself deep inside the architecture of his ambition. People thought Elon feared failure. But in reality, what he feared most was loss. That's why he worked 100-hour weeks. That's why he slept on the Tesla factory floor. That's why he stayed moving, pushing, building. If he stopped, if he paused, even for a moment, everything might collapse. Or worse, he might. The relationship with X was unlike anything Elon had experienced before. The boy was a mirror. Not of Elon's success, but of his soul. X was curious like him. Quirky. Philosophical beyond his years. But he was also soft in ways Elon had never allowed himself to be. The boy hugged without hesitation. Asked questions without shame. Felt things with the full weight of his tiny heart. When X was born, Elon swore to be different. He said this time, he'd show up. Be present. Be warm. He'd be there. But reality has a funny way of laughing at intentions. SpaceX launches. Global crises. Lawsuits. Acquisitions. Tweets. Life kept getting in the way. Sometimes he'd be mid-conversation with X, then drift off into a Slack message or a conference call. Other times, he'd nod absent-mindedly while X talked about dreams and dragons and, what if the moon cried, without really hearing him. And each time he missed a moment, he felt it. A small crack in the wall he was trying to build between who he was and who he wanted to be. There had been a particularly painful memory. It was a few months before the question. X had drawn a picture. It was meant to be a family portrait, him, Elon, and Grimes. But Elon's figure was only half-colored. The rest faded off the page like a shadow. When he asked X about it, the boy just shrugged. I couldn't remember your face, he said quietly. Elon laughed it off at the time. But later that night, he sat in the dark, scrolling through thousands of pictures of Mars renders, satellite images, launch simulations, trying to remember the last time he'd taken a real picture of the two of them together. He couldn't find one. That was the man before the moment. A man who had built empires, disrupted industries, and turned science fiction into headlines. But who still struggled to make eye contact with his own kid over breakfast. Who still flinched when emotions came too close. Who still feared silence more than noise. And so, when X asked that question, are you trying to save the world so you don't have to fix the people in it? It didn't just stun Elon. It cracked something open. It made him realize that maybe, just maybe, for all the things he tried to fix, the one thing he'd been avoiding was himself. There are many ways to be absent. Some people disappear through death. Others through indifference. But Elon Musk? He disappeared in plain sight, with Wi-Fi, satellite coverage, and a constantly vibrating phone in his pocket. Fatherhood, for him, had always been scheduled. Squeezed in between rocket launches and board meetings. A FaceTime call here, a bedtime story over Zoom there. A weekend every few weeks that started with good intentions and ended in exhaustion. He wasn't a bad father. Not in the traditional sense. He provided. He protected. He planned for a future where his children could live safely, on Earth or Mars. But being there isn't always about presence. Sometimes it's about attention. It had started with little things. Missed piano lessons. Skipped school projects. The birthday where Elon promised he'd be there and ended up sending a Tesla drone toy instead. It flew beautifully, sure, but it didn't give hugs. It didn't listen to dreams. Grimes had never been shy about calling it out. You're doing everything for him, but not with him, she said one night during a short co-parenting conversation. Elon looked up from his laptop, rubbing his temples. I'm trying to build a future where he can live freely. That's kind of the point, right? No, she said. That's your point. He just wants you to watch him draw dinosaurs. On a particularly quiet Saturday, X sat on the floor surrounded by crayons, his small fingers stained with red and blue. He was working on a new masterpiece, half dragon, half rocket, when Elon walked in, still on a Bluetooth call. "No, we need to re-engineer the carbon shell if we're launching from the Arctic." Elon paused when he saw the picture. "Hey, bud, what are you drawing?" X looked up, face bright. "It's us. You and me going to space." Elon smiled, nodded, and gave him a distracted thumbs up. He was already turning back to his call when X's voice stopped him. "Wait, Daddy, do you want to color the moon?" Elon looked at his son. The boy was holding out a yellow crayon like it was treasure. "I will in a bit, okay? I just have to finish something first." X didn't pout. He didn't cry. He just nodded and kept coloring. Quietly. By the time Elon returned, 37 minutes later, the picture was finished. He was in it, floating beside his son, but his face was missing. It wasn't intentional. The distance. The disconnect. Elon thought about his own father, a man who loved control more than connection. A man who made Elon feel small, even when he was building rockets out of model parts in the garage at age 10. He swore he'd never be like that. But somehow, in trying to avoid the past, he built a new kind of absence. A high-tech, well-funded, emotionally arm's-length version of fatherhood. And the worst part? He was starting to see it, in X's eyes. They still had their moments. There were nights when Elon powered down, literally turned off all his devices, and just listened. X would talk about everything from lava planets to what it would feel like to ride a star. He'd ask strange, beautiful questions like, "If we go to Mars, do the trees miss us? Can we hear people thinking if we're quiet enough? Do stars get lonely?" Elon, fascinated and a little heartbroken, would try to answer. But sometimes, the boy's questions were too human for his technical brain to fully grasp. He was used to solving problems. Not feelings. One night, X asked him, "Do you like being a daddy?" Elon blinked. "Of course I do." X tilted his head. "Then why are you always going away?" There was no anger in the question. No judgment. Just curiosity. The kind that stung more than blame ever could. Elon stayed quiet for a long time after that. Long enough for X to fall asleep mid-sentence, murmuring something about robot puppies and rainbow ice cream. In meetings the next day, Elon was off. His focus drifted. He snapped at an engineer. Missed a launch report deadline. His team chalked it up to stress. But in his mind, all he could hear was his son's voice. "Then why are you always going away?" The guilt wasn't loud. It was subtle. Like static beneath every decision. Every time he chose another meeting over story time. Every time he replied to a tweet instead of a bedtime question. Every time he showed up physically but wasn't really there. He had built a legacy in rockets, but was struggling to launch something as simple as trust with his own kid. One Sunday morning, after a particularly exhausting overnight design session, Elon walked into the kitchen to find X pouring milk into a bowl of cereal. Milk spilled everywhere, but X didn't panic. He cleaned it himself. "You didn't wake me up?" Elon asked. "You were busy saving the world," the boy said casually. Elon felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. How could a child say something so neutral, and make it feel like an indictment? Later that day, Elon sat in the garage while X rode around on a little Tesla-branded bike. He was smiling, laughing, occasionally yelling things like, "Watch me, Daddy," and "I'm as fast as a spaceship." Elon watched. Really watched. And something small inside him whispered, "You're missing the real launch. Not on the moon. Not on Mars. Right here. This bike. This laugh. This moment." By the time they came inside, X was sweaty and out of breath, dragging Elon by the hand toward the living room. "Let's build a rocket out of pillows." Elon hesitated, looked toward his phone, then back at the boy. "Yeah, he said softly. Let's do it. It lasted 11 minutes. Then he had to take a call from Berlin. Fatherhood from a distance isn't always intentional. Sometimes it's a slow drift, 1,000 tiny choices that pull two people apart until one day, you realize. You're orbiting the same home, but not the same world. Children ask about the world because they haven't learned to be afraid of the answers. They don't edit their questions. They don't worry about being too deep or too weird. They ask what they feel. They ask what they see. And sometimes, they ask things that shake you at your core. Elon Musk was a man of questions. He built his empire on them. Why can't we make electric cars sexy? Why aren't we on Mars yet? What if AI wipes out humanity, and we built it ourselves? But his son, X, asked questions that couldn't be answered with numbers or tech specs. Questions that had no data set. No model. No spreadsheet. Questions like: if we fix the planet, will people stop being mean? Why do people get mad when others are different? If I'm nice to a robot, does it feel it? Elon had been through product audits, congressional hearings, global lawsuits. But he had never felt more unprepared than when his 4-year-old looked up at him and asked, "If you go to Mars, will I come too? Or will I just miss you forever?" That question came on a rainy Thursday, one of those rare California days when the sky matched Elon's mood. They were in the home theater, watching a space documentary. The camera panned over the Martian surface, red and desolate and beautiful. X was curled up next to him, barefoot, one hand resting on Elon's arm like an anchor. "When we go," X whispered, "can we take everyone?" Elon paused the screen. "Everyone?" "Yeah," X nodded. "Everyone who's lonely. Then nobody will be lonely on Mars." Elon stared at him, trying to process the logic. It was so pure. So innocent. And completely at odds with the reality of space travel. He wanted to explain the logistics. The costs. The danger. But all he said was, "We'll do our best." X squinted. "Promise?" That word. It hit harder than any rocket crash. It became a pattern. Every week, more questions. Some silly. Some strange. Some that Elon couldn't stop thinking about days later. Like the time X asked, "Why don't you smile when you say you love me?" Or, "If you make the world better, will that make people nicer too?" And the most recent one. "If I dream about space, is that real enough for now?" Elon had always encouraged questions. He believed curiosity was the root of all innovation. But this was different. These questions weren't about how. They were about why. And for the first time in a long time, Elon realized. He didn't have answers. Not really. At night, after X went to bed, Elon would pace the hallway replaying the questions in his mind like riddles. He opened his journal for the first time in months and started jotting them down. Not the answers. Just the questions. If I'm nice to a robot, does it feel it? Why do people get mad when others are different? Why don't you smile when you say you love me? He stared at that last one for a long time. Was it true? Did he really not smile? He remembered a time during his early PayPal days when he believed money could solve everything. That if he had enough capital, he could buy time, peace, connection. Now, here he was, a billionaire, and his son was teaching him more about humanity than all the think tanks he'd funded combined. That night, he stayed beside X until he fell asleep. Watched his little chest rise and fall. Rubbed a hand gently across the boy's hair and whispered, "You ask better questions than most of Congress." X mumbled something in his sleep. Elon didn't catch the words. But he caught the feeling. The next morning, during breakfast, X looked at his bowl of cereal and said, "If you made a robot that could dream, would it dream about you?" Elon blinked. "Maybe," he said slowly. If it was modeled after me. X took a bite, then looked up. But would you like what it dreamed about? Silence. There it was again, that tiny wrecking ball of a sentence. Not meant to destroy. Just, to reveal. Later that day, Elon skipped a board call. Told his assistant to reschedule a design review. Instead, he sat outside with a sketchpad, something he hadn't done since college. He tried drawing what X might imagine Mars looked like, not just terrain, but feelings. A place where people weren't lonely. Where no one had to be different. Where even robots were treated kindly. He realized, for the first time in forever, he wasn't sketching a planet. He was sketching home. The questions kept coming. And with each one, Elon changed, just a little. He was still the same man, intense, driven, restless. But now he paused more. Listened longer. Noticed details he'd once ignored. Like the way X lined up his toy rockets by color. Or how he whispered, "Good night, Moonbase," to his globe every evening. Elon began to wonder if X was really asking him questions. Or teaching him how to ask his own. There's a certain magic in childhood curiosity. It's not strategic. It's not optimized. It's not monetized. It just is. And sometimes, it holds more power than all the technology in the world. Elon Musk had conquered industries. But now, he was beginning to realize. The most important frontier left to explore wasn't outer space. It was a 4-year-old boy's mind. There are problems you can solve with physics. There are problems you can solve with funding. There are even problems you can solve by sending people into orbit. But what do you do when the problem is you? Not your code. Not your mission. You. That's where Elon Musk found himself. In the quiet moments between rocket launches and quarterly earnings calls, something inside him was shifting. Or maybe cracking. The questions from X, that beautiful, maddening little philosopher in a 4-year-old's body, had peeled back layers Elon didn't even know he'd built. And underneath? There wasn't an answer. Just a man realizing that all his brilliance had limits. It started with a simple request. Can you come to my class and talk about space? X had asked it one morning while eating waffles shaped like stars. His face was covered in syrup. His eyes were pure hope. Elon smiled, checking his phone. I'd love to, buddy. When is it? Next Friday. Elon nodded. Next Friday. Got it. He didn't write it down. And by the time next Friday arrived, he was in Houston, reviewing engine prototypes and fielding a live Q&A with engineers on livestream. It wasn't until he landed back in LA that he opened a crayon-colored flyer from X's backpack. Space Week, special guest, my dad. The date? Yesterday. He missed it. That night, Elon stood outside X's bedroom door and listened. No crying. No tantrum. Just silence. Inside, the boy had already fallen asleep, his little astronaut helmet resting next to him on the bed. Next to it, a drawing of a classroom. Stick figures. Laughter. Stars. And one empty chair. Labeled, Dad. Elon felt the ache in his chest before he could rationalize it away. No data point. No PR spin. No explanation. He had broken a promise. And the thing about promises is, they're not like missed meetings. You don't reschedule them. You just lose them. The next morning, he tried to make it up. Bought a Lego Saturn V set. Let X stay up past bedtime. Said, I'm sorry, more sincerely than he had in years. X smiled. Played. Hugged him. But something in his eyes had dimmed. Not because of anger. Because of disappointment. That's when Elon realized something terrifying. He could land rockets backward. But he couldn't stop the slow drift between himself and his son. He brought it up in therapy. One of the few things he kept quiet about publicly. He used to look at me like I was everything, Elon said, hands clenched. And now, the therapist asked. Now, it's like he sees through me. Like he knows I'm not there even when I'm right in front of him. The therapist didn't speak for a moment. Elon, she said gently, do you think you see him clearly? Elon blinked. What do you mean? You talk about who he was. But who is he now? What does he need today? The word sat with him like code he didn't know how to compile. He spent that weekend trying to stay present. Turned off his phone. Watched cartoons with X, built half a pillow fort before his back gave out. At one point, X asked. Did you used to be a kid too? Elon chuckled. I think so. Feels like a long time ago. Did your dad forget stuff too? Elon didn't answer. He just hugged the boy tighter than usual. But Monday came. As it always did. And with it, launches. Meetings. Deadlines. Distractions. By Wednesday, he was halfway back to old patterns, halfway to old Elon. Until Grimes called. Her voice was calm. Too calm. X's teacher called. He's been quieter lately. Not bad, just different. When she asked him what was wrong, he said, maybe my dad's a hero for the world but not for me. Silence. Then, softly. You need to talk to him. Elon sat in the dark that night, staring at his own reflection in the glass wall of his office. It didn't look like the future. It looked like a man lost in it. He thought of all the things he'd fixed. Solar energy. Satellite internet. Traffic flow. Space travel. And yet, the one person he loved more than all of it, was starting to drift out of reach. He got up. Walked down the hall. Knocked gently on X's door. The boy was awake, sitting cross-legged in bed, flashlight under his chin like a tiny ghost storyteller. Can I come in? X nodded slowly. Elon sat on the edge of the bed. I'm sorry I missed your class. The boy was quiet. I told them all about you, X finally said. Even though you weren't there. Elon swallowed hard. What did you say? X smiled, eyes sad but soft. I said you make rockets because you want people to feel safe flying far away. But maybe, you forgot how to land close. There it was. The problem he couldn't fix. Not with money. Not with machines. Not with ambition. Only with something he hadn't practiced in years. Being human. Mars was the dream. The escape plan. The symbol of everything Elon Musk believed in, survival, innovation, and second chances. He had spent years talking about it. On stages. In interviews. On Twitter. We have to become a multiplanetary species. A backup for civilization. Life insurance for humanity. But lately, Mars had started to feel like something else. Not a frontier. Not a solution. A mirror. And it was showing him more than he wanted to see. He first noticed it during a visit to the SpaceX starbase in Texas. The latest Mars-bound ship stood tall on the launch pad, 400 feet of polished ambition. The wind whipped across the concrete, carrying the faint scent of dust and jet fuel. Elon stood staring up at it with a team of engineers. But his mind wasn't on fuel ratios or thermal shielding. It was on a child's voice, whispering in his head. Maybe you forgot how to land close. That line had followed him everywhere. He heard it during system checks. Saw it on mission dashboards. Felt it in the long silences between texts from X. It was like his son had gently placed a mirror in front of him, and now all Elon could do was look. And what he saw terrified him. Mars had always been about possibility. Now it was starting to feel like projection. It wasn't just a red rock in space. It was a symbol of escape. From Earth. From pain. From failure. From people. He remembered saying once in an interview, "I want to die on Mars. Just not on impact." It used to get laughs. Now it felt more like a confession. That night, Elon stayed alone at the starbase. His team had gone home. The launch pad lights dimmed. The hum of distant generators filled the night. He opened his laptop. Pulled up a simulation. Mars surface overlay. Habitat modules. Solar array placement. Dust storm probability. All of it, lines of code, logistics, data, felt suddenly sterile. What was he even building it for anymore? Was it about saving humanity? Or was it about avoiding intimacy? Was Mars a noble mission? Or a convenient distraction? He closed the laptop and stepped outside. The sky above was pitch black, littered with stars. Somewhere, Earth was spinning beneath his feet. Somewhere, his son was asleep, probably holding a stuffed rocket ship. And that's when it hit him. Mars was just another version of the distance. Different planet. Same problem. He flashed back to when he first dreamt of leaving Earth. He'd been 12, huddled under his bedsheets in South Africa with a flashlight and a battered copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He didn't want to go to space just for adventure. He wanted to go because Earth didn't feel safe. Not his neighborhood. Not his family. Not his own skin. Back then, Mars had been a fantasy, a place far enough that nothing could hurt him. He had never really outgrown that. He had just industrialized it. Now here he was, on the edge of the dream, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel sure. Not about the mission. But about himself. Because what good was saving the world if he couldn't even connect to the piece of it that mattered most? What if his greatest invention wasn't Starship? What if it was the wall he built between himself and anyone who tried to love him? The next morning, during a sunrise review with his lead engineers, Elon stared out at the red dust blowing across the concrete. One of them was explaining trajectory adjustments for an upcoming Mars window. Elon wasn't listening. He was thinking about X. The boy who could spot a lie in a smile. Who built rocket ships out of couch cushions. Who asked questions with no easy answers. And for the first time, Elon asked himself a terrifying one. What if I get to Mars and I'm still not enough? Back in LA later that week, he walked into the house quietly. The hallway lights were off. His shoes made soft sounds on the floor. He peeked into X's room. The boy was awake, sitting cross-legged in bed, drawing in the dark with a flashlight clipped to his shirt. What are you working on? Elon asked softly. X turned the drawing around. It was a picture of Mars. But this one had people. Families. Laughter. Kids playing on red dirt. Trees that shouldn't have been able to grow. In the corner, a little house with two stick figures. I made us a home, X said. In case you forget. Elon couldn't speak. He just sat beside the bed, held the drawing, and whispered, "Thank you." For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like an inventor. He felt like a student. Elon Musk had always understood media. He knew how to use it, how to bend headlines to his advantage, stir hype, dominate cycles. A single tweet could crash stock prices or send Dogecoin into orbit. A podcast appearance with a joint in hand could become a cultural moment. But for all his mastery of messaging, one thing remained true. He hated being vulnerable in front of the world. So when vulnerability started bleeding into his public image, not as a brand strategy, but as an accident, he didn't know how to react. It started with a clip. Just 40 seconds. Grainy footage taken by a parent at X's preschool space day. X had been sitting on a stool in front of the class, holding up a drawing of Mars. And he said, "My dad builds rockets, but he's also learning how to be home." There was a pause, then a smile. "He's good at going far. I'm teaching him how to come back." That clip went viral in less than 3 hours. By morning, it was everywhere. Elon Musk's son gives him a lesson in humanity, NYT opinion. Forget Mars, Musk's hardest mission might be fatherhood, Vox. The Rocket Man and the 4-year-old philosopher, The Atlantic. At first, Elon laughed it off. "Kids say the darndest things," he tweeted. It racked up 72K likes in an hour. But he was rattled. Not because of the attention. Because of the accuracy. For the first time, the public wasn't just seeing the inventor, the genius, the disruptor. They were seeing the man who forgot Space Day. The father who broke a promise. The human version of Elon Musk. And it wasn't a polished portrait. It was raw. Real. Uncontrolled. He didn't like that. He was used to leading the narrative, not being at the mercy of it. Grimes called that afternoon. "You okay?" she asked. "Define okay," he muttered. She didn't push. Just said, "He's proud of you, you know. You're showing up more. He feels it." "I missed his class," Elon said flatly. "And you're still here trying," she replied. "He doesn't want a perfect dad. He wants you. Even when you mess up." But the media wasn't interested in nuance. Some praised him. Others mocked him. A few took shots at the idea of a tech billionaire suddenly discovering empathy. "What's next?" Elon cries at a poetry slam. One headline read, "Musk softens, should we be worried?" It was like compassion had become a weakness. In board meetings that week, Elon felt the shift. A senior engineer joked, "Careful, guys, the boss might cry if we miss the deadline." He laughed along. But it stung. His vulnerability, once invisible, was now on display. And in the world he built, one of numbers, launches, and stockholder expectations, softness was risky. That night, he scrolled through the clip again. X's small voice. The drawing. That line. "He's good at going far. I'm teaching him how to come back." It didn't sound like a 4-year-old showing off. It sounded like a 4-year-old saving his father. The next morning, Elon surprised X at preschool. No cameras. No security detail. Just him, a bag of moon-shaped cookies, and a quiet apology. When he walked into the classroom, X's eyes lit up like a solar panel in high noon sun. "Daddy." Elon knelt down, hugged him, and whispered, "Thanks for teaching me." X grinned. "Did you land close today?" "Yeah," Elon smiled. "Closest I've ever landed." They sat on the floor together during art time. Other parents whispered, some took photos, but Elon didn't care. He let X smear glue and glitter on his sleeves. Listened as he explained which crayons were best for drawing Martian pizza. And when the teacher asked if anyone wanted to share something they'd learned recently, Elon raised his hand. The room went still. "I learned," he said slowly, "that the scariest place to go isn't space." Pause. It's being seen for real, by someone who loves you. Some kids didn't get it. Most adults did. X just leaned his head on Elon's arm. By the next week, the memes were flying. Elon Musk, from Mars to dad mode. Rocket Man meets glue stick. Some were mocking. Some were moving. But Elon had stopped reading them. Because for the first time, he wasn't performing. He was becoming. And in becoming something new, he realized something wild. Maybe vulnerability wasn't a glitch. Maybe it was fuel. There are questions that make you think. Questions that make you feel. And then, there are questions that change you. Forever. Elon had spent the last few weeks trying. Trying to be present. Trying to soften. Trying to become more than a headline or a silhouette lit by rocket fire. He thought he was doing okay. But kids don't measure your efforts. They measure your presence. And one evening, in the middle of their nightly routine, just as Elon was pulling the blanket over X's legs and turning off the rocket-shaped lamp, his son asked. "Dad, are you gonna die before I grow up?" Time stopped. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the air purifier. X was staring up at him, eyes wide. Not scared. Just, searching. Elon sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling his heart thump like a misfiring engine. "Why do you ask that?" he whispered. X shrugged. "I saw a video. They said people die. Even smart people." Another pause. "Even dads." Elon swallowed. He'd been asked hard questions in his life. World leaders, global press, billion-dollar investors. He'd been grilled about ethics, privacy, war, climate, AI. But nothing had ever hit him like this. Because this question wasn't about facts. It was about fear. And it came from the one person who didn't care about his net worth or his Mars ambitions. Just, his existence. "I don't know when," Elon finally said. "But I'm here right now." X looked away. "But what if I forget your voice? Or your laugh? Or how your arms feel when you hug me?" Elon felt his throat tighten. "You won't forget," he said, placing a hand on X's tiny chest. "Because I'm part of this. Your heart. Right here." X nodded slowly, then whispered. "Will you promise me something?" Elon leaned in. "Anything. Promise you won't go to Mars without me." There it was. Not a challenge. Not a tantrum. Just a quiet request from a boy whose imagination could stretch across galaxies. But whose greatest fear was being left behind on Earth. Elon didn't answer right away. Because he couldn't. He had spent years framing Mars as the future. As the ultimate destination. The escape hatch. And now, in a single sentence, his son had reframed it. Mars wasn't a triumph. It was abandonment. That night, after X was asleep, Elon wandered through the house in silence. He passed rooms filled with futuristic tech, neural prototypes, smart glass, ambient interfaces. But none of it could prepare him for this. Not for death. Not for legacy. Not for the kind of love that made leaving feel like a betrayal. He sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a pen and paper, and started writing something he hadn't in years. To X. For the future. For someday. For if. If you're reading this, it means I'm not around anymore. Maybe I left the planet. Maybe I just left life. Either way, I want you to know something. You were always my mission. More than Mars. More than anything. You asked the questions that made me human again. I don't know where we go when we die. But if it's anything like space, vast, silent, infinite, then I'll be looking for your voice in the stars. And I'll be listening. Always. The next morning, Elon sat down with X at breakfast. No phone. No meetings. Just cereal and honesty. I want to show you something, he said, pulling out a small wooden box. Inside was a little recording device. Simple interface. Red button. I'm gonna record a message every week. A story, a joke, a memory. Even when I'm far, this'll be here. X stared at the box, then looked up, eyes shimmering. Even when you go to Mars? Elon nodded. Even then. X reached out, touched the recorder gently. Okay. But only if I get to leave messages too. Elon grinned. Deal. Later that day, while X was napping, Elon stood at his window, watching the sky shift from blue to deep gray. He thought about all the systems he'd ever built. Solar cities. Starlink arrays. Hyperloop routes. But none of them mattered as much as the system he was building now. Between him and his sun. Between Earth and Mars. Between time and memory. And for the first time, Mars didn't feel so far away. Because he realized. He didn't need to escape anymore. He just needed to connect. The clock was ticking. For years, Elon had dreamed of this moment. The perfect launch window. The precise alignment of Mars and Earth. The conditions that would allow SpaceX's Starship to depart for the Red Planet. A mission that would take humanity one step closer to becoming a multiplanetary species. Everything had been calculated. Every detail had been planned. And now, the final phase of preparation was underway. The window was closing. In just 3 months, the crew would be ready to board the spacecraft. The payload was packed. The destination was set. The countdown was officially on. But as Elon sat in the command center of SpaceX, staring at the glowing monitors in front of him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The launch was no longer just a technical milestone. It had become a personal decision. And he was torn. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. Between media interviews, board meetings, and the constant pressure of the Mars mission, Elon had been running on fumes. But there was something more pressing on his mind now, the voice of a 4-year-old boy who had asked him to promise he wouldn't leave. Promise you won't go to Mars without me. It had been the one request Elon couldn't answer, because the truth was, he had no idea what was more important anymore. Was it his ambition to change the world? Or was it the simple act of being present for the person who depended on him the most? X's question had shaken him to his core. For the first time, Elon was faced with a decision that wasn't just about his legacy. It was about love. Connection. Family. As Elon walked through the SpaceX campus, his mind was elsewhere. The engineers, technicians, and scientists were buzzing with energy, preparing for the mission. But he could barely focus on the numbers, the specs, or the launch pad. He had spent his whole life building toward this moment, the chance to take humanity to Mars. To be remembered as the man who made the impossible possible. But now, he was questioning whether the cost was too high. He missed his son's laugh. Missed their quiet mornings together. Missed the feeling of just being with him. And the thought of leaving all of that behind, for the cold expanse of space, it didn't feel like a triumph anymore. It felt like a betrayal. That night, Elon sat in his office, staring at the blueprint for the Mars mission on his desk. The project was a marvel of human ingenuity, Starship, fully stacked and ready to launch. It was the culmination of years of work, of failures and successes, of countless hours spent pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But now, as he traced the lines of the spacecraft with his finger, the reality hit him harder than any technical challenge ever could. There was a mission ahead of him. A mission he had spent his life preparing for. But there was also a son at home, waiting for him to show up, to be there, to stay. He picked up his phone and texted Grimes. "Elon, what if I'm making the wrong choice?" A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Grimes, you're not making the wrong choice. You're just figuring out what really matters." Elon stared at the message for a moment, then put the phone down. She was right. He was figuring it out. But he wasn't sure if he had enough time to figure it out before the countdown began. The next morning, he went home early. He needed to be with X. He needed to feel grounded again. When he arrived, X was in the living room, building another one of his rocket ships out of blocks. This time, it was a real one, no more simple towers or flat structures. The boy was creating a miniature starship, complete with boosters and fins. "You're going to be a great engineer," Elon said with a grin, kneeling down beside him. X smiled up at him. "Maybe. But I need to teach you how to build things that don't leave, Daddy. Elon's smile faltered. They spent the afternoon together. Elon helped X finish the rocket, even adding some details about thrusters and landing gear. It was a small moment, but for Elon, it was the most meaningful one he'd had in months. When the time came to put X to bed, the boy hugged him tightly. "I'll miss you when you go to Mars," X said, his voice barely a whisper. Elon squeezed him back. "You won't miss me, kiddo. I'll always be with you. Even in space." X tilted his head, a frown tugging at his lips. "I don't want you to go there alone." Elon held his son for a long time, not knowing what to say. Later that night, after X was asleep, Elon sat alone in the dark, staring out the window. The stars twinkled in the sky, distant and cold. He thought about the Mars mission. About the people who depended on him to make it happen. And about the future of humanity, which seemed so big, so important. But then he thought about X. About the way the boy trusted him. The way he believed in him. And he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was the moment when everything had to change. The next morning, Elon made a call to the team. "Postpone the mission," he said, his voice steady but resolute. "We need to recalibrate. I'm not launching until we have a better understanding of what we're really doing here." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, the response came. "Understood, Elon. We'll adjust." As he hung up the phone, Elon felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't a permanent decision, not yet. But for the first time, he felt like he was putting his life in perspective. Like he was allowing himself to be human. And maybe that was what mattered most. The moment Elon made the call to postpone the Mars mission, something shifted inside him. It wasn't relief, exactly. It wasn't triumph, either. It was a heavy sense of responsibility, the kind that makes you feel like you've just stepped into the unknown, even though you've spent your life preparing for it. But for the first time, Elon Musk was facing the consequences of a choice that wasn't about technology or business or even space exploration. This decision was about people. The people he loved. The people who needed him. And the people who depended on him to keep pushing the boundaries of possibility. The SpaceX team was in shock when they heard the news. After years of planning, testing, and anticipation, the mission had been postponed. They had worked tirelessly, pouring their energy into the Starship project, building the dream of reaching Mars, and now, it was all on hold. Elon knew the implications. The media would spin this into a fiasco. Investors would question his commitment. Some might even wonder if he had lost his edge, if he had become too soft, too human. But it wasn't just the mission that had made him waver. It was the memory of X's eyes, asking him to promise he wouldn't leave. It was the vulnerability he had never allowed himself to feel, finally seeping through the cracks. The fallout was immediate. The stock price of SpaceX's parent company, Tesla, dipped slightly. Nothing catastrophic, but enough for Elon to feel the weight of it. He could almost hear the whispers of those who questioned his ability to stay the course. Has he lost focus? Is he letting emotions cloud his judgment? Elon sat in his office that afternoon, staring at the fluctuating numbers on his screen, and for the first time in years, he wondered if they were right. Grimes called him later that day, sensing the tension in his voice. "Did you regret it?" she asked softly. Elon didn't have an immediate answer. "I don't know. But I'm not sure how to go back now." That evening, when he got home, X ran up to him with a grin, his face flushed from playing outside. "Did you do it, Daddy? Did you promise?" Elon dropped his briefcase at the door and knelt down to hug his son. "I did, kiddo. I promised." X's eyes lit up. "You're gonna stay with me?" Elon smiled, but it felt heavier than usual. "I'm going to stay with you for as long as I can." The promise felt different now. It wasn't just a commitment to his son. It was a promise to himself. A promise that he would no longer be defined by his relentless pursuit of the next big thing, whether that was Mars or the next breakthrough in AI. He would learn to balance his ambition with his responsibility. But learning to live with that promise wasn't easy. The next few days were a blur of meetings. The team at SpaceX was trying to figure out how to handle the mission's delay. Some were disappointed. Some were angry. But there was one thing that was clear: they needed Elon to be their leader. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he was ready to lead. During a strategy meeting, Elon looked around the table at the engineers and scientists. They were all waiting for him to provide a vision, to give them direction. Instead, he found himself questioning everything. "Where are we headed?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Not just with Mars. I mean, in life. Are we building this to escape? Or are we building it to connect? Because right now, I'm not sure." There was a long silence. The room was filled with people who had devoted years of their lives to this mission, and here was their leader, uncertain. One of the senior engineers spoke up. "Elon, we're building it for the future. For humanity's survival. This is bigger than all of us." Elon nodded, but the words didn't sit right with him. Was it really about survival? Or was it about legacy? Was it about exploring the stars, or was it about finding meaning here, on Earth, with the people who mattered most? "I agree," he said after a pause. "But maybe there's something we've missed along the way. Maybe the reason we're pushing so hard is because we're afraid to stay still. Afraid to let the world catch up with us." That night, Elon sat alone in his office, reviewing the plans for the Mars mission. The starship was ready. The crew was trained. The countdown was ticking. But his mind was on something else. His promise. The weight of it felt like gravity pulling at him. Not the kind that would launch him into space, but the kind that kept him grounded. He picked up the pen and started writing again. This time, it wasn't a letter to X. It was a letter to himself. To Elon. "I've spent my life chasing things. Rockets. Cars. The future. But what happens when I finally catch them? What happens when the dream is within reach, but the people I love need me here? What happens when the mission is no longer the thing I'm building, but the people I'm building it for? I don't know the answers yet. But I know this: I won't let this promise break me." As Elon signed the letter and set it aside, a deep sense of peace settled over him. He wasn't sure what the future held. He didn't know how the mission would unfold, or what decisions he would make next. But for the first time, he understood that the greatest mission of all wasn't about reaching Mars. It was about reaching home. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days were slipping by faster than Elon had anticipated. The world was still watching, waiting for his next move, and the pressure was only mounting. In just a few short weeks, SpaceX's Mars mission was scheduled to launch, if everything went according to plan. But nothing about the situation felt certain anymore. The once clear path to Mars had become a labyrinth of doubts, of second-guessing, of the unshakable feeling that something had been lost along the way. It wasn't just the mission that weighed on him. It was the fact that, for the first time, Elon was questioning his entire trajectory. He had always been driven by the idea of doing what no one thought possible, of being the person who broke barriers and changed the world. But now, he was uncertain whether those dreams had come at too great a cost. X's face, full of hope and trust, still haunted him. The promise he had made, to stay, to be present, was harder than he ever could have imagined. Because staying meant sacrificing a part of himself. The part that had always been focused on the next big challenge. One morning, after another sleepless night spent staring at blueprints and calculations, Elon stood at the window of his office at SpaceX. He gazed out over the sprawling campus below, where rockets and spacecraft were being constructed, where dreams were being forged in metal and fire. But even here, surrounded by the cutting-edge technology he had spent years perfecting, the same question echoed in his mind. What if this wasn't enough? Elon had made the decision to postpone the Mars mission, but he could feel the clock ticking. Every day, the pressure to keep moving forward grew. Investors, employees, the public, they all had expectations. Expectations that he would continue to drive the ship forward, no matter the personal cost. But it was hard to ignore the pull of home. He had promised X that he would stay. And for the first time, Elon realized that staying didn't mean just being in the same room. It meant being there, emotionally and mentally. It meant putting down the phone, stepping away from the constant demands of the world, and actually showing up for his son, in every way that mattered. But could he do that and still honor his dream of going to Mars? Could he live in both worlds? That night, after a long day of meetings, Elon found himself at home, sitting in the living room with X. They were playing a game together, something simple, a puzzle, but it was all that mattered. X had insisted on picking the pieces himself, a clear reminder that the little moments, the ones that didn't matter to anyone else, were the ones that shaped his world. Elon looked down at his son and felt a lump form in his throat. X had no idea the weight his father was carrying. He just wanted to play. Just wanted to feel safe, to feel loved. And for the first time in weeks, Elon realized that this moment, with his son, laughing over a silly puzzle, was the thing that truly mattered. Not Mars. Not the mission. Not the media. It was this. X looked up at him, his brow furrowing as he noticed his father's quiet demeanor. Dad? Are you okay? Elon smiled softly, his heart heavy. Yeah, kiddo. I'm just thinking. What about? Elon hesitated. The truth felt too complicated to put into words. But then he decided to be honest, at least, as honest as he could be. About promises, he said quietly. About what it really means to keep them. X's eyes widened, his curiosity piqued. Are you going to leave? Elon shook his head quickly. No. I'm not leaving. I'm staying. I need to make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. X nodded seriously, as if he understood more than his age suggested. I want you to stay, Dad. I will, Elon promised, his voice tight. I will stay. No matter what. The next few days passed in a blur of activity, but Elon couldn't shake the feeling that he was running out of time, not just to make a decision about the mission, but to make peace with it. He wasn't sure where this would lead him. Mars was still calling to him, but so was his son. So were the people he loved, the ones who depended on him to be there, truly, fully there. At SpaceX, the team was gearing up for the launch. The final checks were being done. The rocket was in place, the countdown clock had begun ticking. It was just a matter of time before the mission was underway. That night, just before bed, Elon sat in the quiet of his study, staring out at the stars through the window. He could almost see Mars in the distance, a tiny, glowing dot among the infinite sea of space. His dream, his life's work, was out there, waiting. But his son was here. On Earth. In his arms. The following morning, Elon sat with Grimes over breakfast. The tension was palpable. She had been supportive, but even she could see the strain in him. You're still thinking about it, aren't you? Grimes asked quietly. Elon nodded. Every day. Every hour. You're torn, she observed, her voice soft but firm. And it's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. You've given so much to this world, to SpaceX, to Tesla, but now, it's time to figure out how to give yourself back. Elon exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if I can do that. I've spent my whole life chasing something. And now you're realizing that the thing you've been chasing might not be the thing you need, she said gently. The conversation lingered in his mind for hours. That night, as he tucked X into bed, he whispered a promise into his son's ear, "No matter where I go, I'm with you. Always." X smiled sleepily. "I know, Dad. I know." Elon didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know whether the Mars mission would go forward or whether he would find a new path. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone in this journey. And maybe that was enough. Elon Musk had always lived with the belief that one could change the world, that a single person's vision could reshape the course of history. He had built rockets, electric cars, and companies that seemed impossible, but each achievement was driven by an unrelenting desire to push the limits of what was possible. And yet, with every success, there came a growing realization. No matter how high you climb, the weight of the world only grows heavier. SpaceX had been his life for so long. His dream of colonizing Mars was the project that kept him up at night, that pushed him to the limits of human endurance, that made him willing to sacrifice everything, including his relationships, his peace of mind, and now, perhaps his sense of self. But now, standing at the precipice of a choice that could define his legacy, he wasn't sure if it was worth it anymore. The morning was unusually quiet as Elon drove to work. Normally, the streets were filled with traffic and the hum of the city, but today, there was a kind of stillness in the air, as if the world was waiting for him to make his next move. The Mars mission was on the brink of launching. The rocket was ready. The crew was prepared. But as the final countdown ticked closer, the uncertainty in Elon's chest only deepened. He had promised his son that he would stay. But had he been too hasty in making that promise? Was he betraying his own vision? Elon felt the tension between the two worlds pulling him in opposite directions. One side demanded the impossible, a future beyond Earth, a future that would ensure humanity's survival. The other side pulled at his heartstrings, his family, the love and care he had promised to give to X, the son who had changed everything. At SpaceX, the team was busy with final preparations. The mission was scheduled to go live in less than a week. The excitement was palpable, yet there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. They all knew how much this mission meant to Elon, but the employees had also seen the toll it had taken on him. Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president, approached him that morning with a look of concern. "Elon, are you sure about this?" she asked. "The world is watching. This is the moment we've all worked toward." "I'm sure," Elon replied, though his voice betrayed him. "We've come too far to stop now." Gwynne studied him carefully. "It's not just about SpaceX anymore. It's about you. About your future. The world won't forgive you if you back down now, but you won't forgive yourself if you go through with it. You're caught between two realities, and I don't know if anyone can truly choose." Elon met her gaze. She was right. No matter what he did, there would be consequences. The only question was whether he could live with them. Later that day, Elon found himself standing alone on the launch pad, gazing up at the massive rocket that stood ready. It looked like a monolith, a testament to years of hard work, innovation, and ambition. The rocket that was supposed to take humanity to Mars. But in that moment, all he could see was the weight of the promise he had made to X, and the weight of the dreams that had driven him for so long. He closed his eyes and let the quiet of the moment settle over him. The wind, the distant sounds of machinery, the quiet hum of the world going on without him, it all seemed so distant, so irrelevant. In that stillness, he felt a deep sense of peace. But it was fleeting. Later that night, Elon sat alone at his desk, staring at the final launch plan in front of him. His hand hovered over the confirm button, but he couldn't bring himself to press it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The decision felt more impossible the longer he stared at it. Grimes had been quiet lately, giving him space to think, but it was clear that the distance between them was growing. The pull of his ambition, his desire to conquer the impossible, was pushing him away from the people he loved. Just as he was about to give up on making any decision that night, his phone rang. It was X's school calling. He quickly answered. Mr. Musk, the voice on the other end said, X's teacher just wanted to inform you that he's been asking a lot about you today. He misses you and hopes you'll be able to come home soon. Elon's chest tightened. It was a simple message, but the weight of it crushed him. His son missed him. And he missed X too, more than he could put into words. He dropped the phone onto his desk and ran a hand through his hair. The rocket was ready. The mission was about to begin. But in that moment, he wasn't thinking about the stars or Mars. He was thinking about a little boy who just wanted his dad to come home. The next morning, he made his decision. He didn't know if it was the right one, but he knew it was the one he had to make. Elon called Gwyn early, his voice steady but firm. I'm postponing the Mars mission again, he said. I can't go through with it. Not now. Not when the people I love need me here. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Gwyn sighed, a long, tired exhale. I knew this was coming, she said softly. But I understand. Just, know that this isn't the end. We'll get back to it when the time is right. I don't know when that time will be, Elon said quietly. But I know it isn't now. That night, as he sat with X on the couch, watching a movie together, Elon felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The weight of the world, the pressure to lead and innovate, had lifted, at least for now. And in its place was a simple truth: he didn't have to choose between his dreams and his family. He could have both. But to do that, he had to be present. He had to show up. He put his arm around X, who snuggled up to him, and for the first time in a long time, Elon felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The decision to postpone the Mars mission had been monumental, and although Elon had made peace with it, the world hadn't stopped spinning. The headlines, the investors, the critics, they all still had their opinions, but Elon had finally come to understand that the weight of their expectations was no longer his burden to carry alone. Now, in the quiet of his home, he was rediscovering something he had lost in the relentless pursuit of innovation: the importance of presence. It was a Saturday morning, and Elon was in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast for X. Cooking had never been his strong suit, he had always relied on others to handle things like food, but today felt different. He was determined to do this. For X. Dad, I want pancakes. X's voice rang out from the living room. Elon smiled to himself, grabbed the pancake mix from the cupboard, and tried to follow the instructions. It wasn't perfect, and as he accidentally spilled flour onto the counter, he couldn't help but laugh. It was messy, chaotic, and absolutely normal. Pancakes are ready. Elon called, setting the plate down in front of X at the table. X's eyes lit up. Wow, you made these, Dad. They look awesome. Elon chuckled. Well, they might not win any cooking contests, but they're definitely made with love. X grinned, already digging into his pancakes with gusto. As Elon sat across from him, watching his son eat, a strange calmness washed over him. This was real. This was what mattered. Not the next big project, not the billions in investments, not even Mars. The smile on X's face was worth more than all the rockets and electric cars in the world. Over the next few weeks, Elon began to shift his focus. He still had his passions, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, but his perspective had changed. He no longer viewed his work as an all-consuming force. Instead, he looked for ways to make an impact that didn't require constant sacrifice of his personal life. He began dedicating more time to his family, attending X's school events, and even planning family trips. Grimes, too, noticed the difference in him. There was a lightness to his demeanor that had been absent before. For the first time in years, he wasn't rushing off to another meeting or brainstorming session. He was right here. Present. One evening, as they sat outside, watching the sunset together, Grimes turned to Elon. I've noticed something, she said. You've been more present lately. More grounded. Is this the new Elon? Elon smiled, looking out at the horizon. I think so. I've spent so much time focusing on the next big thing that I forgot about the things that really matter, the people around me, the little moments that add up to a lifetime. It's easy to get lost in the chase. I've spent years chasing Mars, but I think I've finally realized that there's more to life than just getting there. Grimes nodded thoughtfully. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. That evening, after X had gone to bed, Elon took some time to reflect on his recent shift. The decision to postpone the Mars mission had sparked something in him, a recognition that he could still change the world, but not at the expense of his happiness or his family's well-being. In the quiet of the night, he opened up his laptop and started writing. He wrote about his vision for the future, not just for SpaceX or Tesla, but for the world at large. He wrote about how technology could serve humanity, not just be a tool for profit or power. He wrote about balance, how ambition and family could coexist, how the pursuit of greatness didn't have to come at the cost of love and connection. The next morning, he shared his thoughts with Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president. They had a long conversation about the future of space exploration. Elon, the vision you have for humanity is incredible. But you've also built a company with people who rely on you. So, what's next? Gwynne asked. I don't know yet, Elon said thoughtfully. I still want to go to Mars, but I'm not going to rush it. I want to do it when the time is right. Not just for SpaceX, but for me, for my family. And in the meantime, I'm focusing on how to integrate technology with people's lives, on Earth. It's not just about escaping to Mars, it's about what we can build here, right now. Gwynne was quiet for a moment. I think that's a good approach. And honestly, it might lead to a more sustainable future for both Earth and Mars. If we solve the problems here, we'll be better prepared for the challenges of colonizing another planet. In the following months, Elon's focus shifted toward sustainable living solutions. He became increasingly involved in developing technologies that would improve life on Earth, using Tesla's electric cars, SolarCity's solar power solutions, and even some of the innovations from Neuralink to create a more sustainable, interconnected world. He started initiatives aimed at reducing carbon emissions, improving access to clean water, and creating sustainable energy grids. SpaceX's Mars mission remained a long-term goal, but Elon's new goal was a balanced approach: prepare for the future, but never lose sight of the present. One evening, Elon and X went for a walk in the park. X was running ahead, his laughter echoing in the distance. Elon couldn't help but smile. I want to go to Mars, Dad. X said excitedly as he looked back. Elon laughed. Well, I'm working on that, buddy. But for now, I think we'll stick to Earth. It's still a pretty amazing place, don't you think? X nodded earnestly. Yeah. I think Earth is pretty cool too. Elon ruffled his son's hair, his heart full. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of balance. There was still so much to do, so many challenges to face, but he was no longer trying to carry the weight of the world alone. He had a team, his family, his employees, his friends, and together, they would change the world in ways that mattered. The future was uncertain, but Elon was ready to face it with a new sense of clarity. Mars was still out there, waiting. But Earth was his home. And maybe, just maybe, he could have both. As the months passed, Elon found himself growing more reflective. His decision to scale back from the relentless pursuit of the Mars mission had allowed him to view his life through a different lens. There was no longer the constant pressure of deadlines, no unrelenting expectations from the world around him. Instead, he found a deeper connection with those closest to him, a richer understanding of the true nature of success. And in that stillness, a new realization began to dawn on him: technology was powerful, yes. But it was people, human connections, that made technology meaningful. It was a rainy afternoon when Elon found himself at a gathering organized by one of his longtime colleagues. A group of innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech enthusiasts were gathered in a cozy room, exchanging ideas and discussing the future. For once, Elon wasn't the one leading the conversation. He was simply listening. "Do you think the world is ready for a mass migration to Mars?" someone asked, sipping their coffee. Elon smiled softly. "Not yet," he said. "But maybe we're ready to solve the problems here on Earth first." The room fell silent, as if the words had carried more weight than anyone had expected. They were all used to thinking of Mars as the next frontier, the next big step for humanity. But the truth was, Earth still needed attention, and so did the people living on it. The potential for growth wasn't just in escaping to another planet, but in working together to build a better life for those already here. As the discussion continued, Elon realized something important. It wasn't just about the technology that would take humans to Mars or power electric cars. It was about the relationships, the partnerships, and the communities they built along the way. It was about connection, how people came together to solve problems, innovate and inspire each other. Later that evening, he called Grimes. "I've been thinking," he said when she picked up. "It's not enough to just build the future with technology. We need to build it with people." Grimes was quiet for a moment before responding. "I think you're onto something. People are the key to everything. Without connection, all the technology in the world doesn't mean a thing." Elon nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Exactly. We've been so focused on creating machines, that we've forgotten to create the human connections that make all of it worthwhile." The next day, he put his thoughts into action. He gathered a small team at Tesla to brainstorm ways in which the company could better engage with communities. It was no longer enough to innovate for the sake of innovation. Elon knew that the real power lay in ensuring that technology served people and brought them together. "We've built electric cars," he said, standing in front of the whiteboard. "Now, let's figure out how we can use these cars to bring communities closer together. How can we use Tesla's technology to empower people, not just as consumers, but as collaborators? How do we ensure that our innovations benefit the world at large?" The team spent hours discussing ideas that went beyond cars, that went beyond electric power. They explored ways to make sustainable energy more accessible, to bring clean water to communities in need, and to build networks of people who could share resources and knowledge. They discussed building small communities around sustainable energy hubs, using Tesla's power walls to create autonomous, energy-efficient neighborhoods. Elon had always been a visionary, but now he saw the power of those visions in a different light. They weren't just about achieving personal success. They were about creating opportunities for others to grow, to thrive, and to connect. Later that week, Elon visited a Tesla factory in Fremont, California. As he walked through the production lines, he found himself not focusing on the technology or the cars, but on the workers, the people who made it all possible. He watched them work together, their conversations filled with excitement and purpose. "Thanks for being part of this," Elon said to one of the employees as they shared a brief conversation. The worker smiled and nodded. "We're building something that matters," Elon added. "Not just for us, but for everyone who will use these cars, who will benefit from this technology. It's bigger than us. It's bigger than any of us individually." As he moved from person to person, speaking with the team members, something became clear. The true power of Tesla wasn't in the cars they built, the electric engines they perfected, or even the profits they made. It was in the shared vision that each person carried with them. Each person contributed a piece of something greater than themselves. It was the collective energy, the sense that they were all connected by a common goal. As weeks turned into months, Elon's understanding of his role began to shift. His influence wasn't only rooted in the groundbreaking technologies he created. It was in his ability to connect with others, to unite them under a shared vision, and to create a sense of community. The world wasn't just a place of individual endeavors, it was a place where everyone's efforts were interwoven, forming a tapestry of progress. He had always believed in the power of technology to change the world, but now he believed in something even more powerful, the power of people to come together and change it. One evening, after a long day at work, Elon sat on the back porch of his home with X, watching the sunset once again. This time, though, the world felt a little different. It wasn't the weight of the future on his shoulders. It was the weight of the present, the connection he felt with his son, his colleagues, and the people whose lives would be touched by the work they were doing. You know, Elon said to X, the most important thing isn't what we build. It's who we build it with. X tilted his head. You mean us? Elon smiled. Exactly. You, me, and everyone who works together. That's what makes everything worth it. X grinned, his eyes bright with understanding. Yeah, I get it now. It's about the team. Exactly, Elon said. And every team starts with connection. As Elon looked out over the horizon, he realized that the next chapter of his life wasn't about grand technological feats or ambitious missions to Mars. It was about building bridges, between people, between ideas, and between the future and the present. He had always been a dreamer, but now he understood that the most beautiful dreams were the ones shared by many. The power of connection had just begun to show him what was possible. Elon had spent his life defining what was impossible. From electric cars to reusable rockets, his career had been built on pushing the boundaries of what was thought to be unachievable. But now, as he looked at the world through new eyes, eyes that saw not just technology, but people, he began to question the very notion of impossibility. Was it really about achieving something impossible? Or was it about ensuring that those who couldn't dream of these feats were still part of the journey? It was late one evening when Elon sat down with Gwynne Shotwell at SpaceX headquarters. They had just wrapped up another round of meetings, and the conversation shifted to the future of space exploration. SpaceX has come a long way, Elon, Gwynne said. We've reached heights that most people thought were years away. But we both know we're not done. There's still Mars. There's still the moon. There's so much left to do. Elon rubbed his temples. He wasn't tired, in fact, he was filled with more energy than ever. But something about the conversation felt different. It was as though the excitement of conquering the next frontier was losing its shine. I've been thinking, he began slowly, about what we're really building. And who we're building it for. Gwynne raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? It's not enough to just reach Mars, Gwynne, Elon said, looking up at her. We need to ensure that everyone here, on Earth, can benefit from the technology we create. We're talking about going to another planet, but we need to remember that there are people right here who need our attention too. People who are being left behind. Gwynne was silent for a moment. I think I get it. You want to make sure that we're not just focused on the future, but that we're addressing the needs of the present too. Elon nodded. Exactly. We can't be so obsessed with the impossible that we forget about the very real struggles happening right in front of us. It's easy to be caught up in the idea of space exploration, of creating the next big breakthrough. But real progress comes when we bring everyone along with us, when we make sure that technology is a tool for everyone, not just a select few. The conversation lingered in Elon's mind long after the meeting ended. He found himself awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the enormity of what he had just said. Had he been so fixated on Mars, on colonizing another planet, that he had lost sight of what really mattered? For years, he had fought to prove that the impossible was achievable, that humanity could go further, do more, and break free from the limitations of Earth. But in doing so, he had never fully considered the consequences of that ambition. Who would be left behind? What about the people who didn't have access to the technology he was building? What about the ones who couldn't afford the latest electric car, or the ones who would never have a seat on a SpaceX rocket? The next day, Elon met with his leadership teams at both SpaceX and Tesla. He had decided that it was time for a shift, a recalibration of the way he viewed success. We've done incredible things, Elon began, addressing his teams. But as we push forward, I want to make sure that we're not just thinking about the next breakthrough, we need to be thinking about how we can make every breakthrough count for everyone, not just for those at the top. Gwynne Shotwell stood by his side, nodding in agreement. We've always said that our mission is to make life multiplanetary, but we need to realize that the real work starts here, on Earth. The technology we create needs to be accessible to everyone, and that means we need to rethink how we develop, distribute, and implement these technologies. Elon spent the next few months meeting with communities around the world, learning about the struggles of those who were often forgotten in the rush for progress. He visited rural areas, communities struggling with pollution, regions hit by climate change, and cities battling poverty. Everywhere he went, he saw the same theme: people were not just asking for new technologies, they were asking for hope, for a future that included them. One conversation stood out to him in particular. He had traveled to a small town in the Midwest, where the local coal mines had shut down, leaving families without work. Elon sat down with a group of workers who had spent their entire lives mining coal. One of them, a middle-aged man named John, spoke up. "You know, Elon," John said, "we're all for progress. We want to see a better future. But we're scared. We've spent our lives working in these mines, and now there's no job for us. What are we supposed to do now?" Elon felt a pang in his chest. For all his accomplishments, for all the innovations he had brought to the world, he hadn't fully realized the impact those advancements had on people like John. Progress couldn't just mean new technologies, it had to mean a new way of life for everyone, not just the ones who could afford it. "I'm not here to promise you that it's going to be easy," Elon said, his voice sincere. "But I promise you that we're going to figure this out together. Technology, innovation, it's not just about making things better for some of us. It's about making things better for all of us." By the end of the year, Elon had launched several initiatives aimed at retraining workers in industries affected by automation, offering them new opportunities in the renewable energy sector. He worked with local governments and organizations to ensure that new technologies would be deployed in a way that benefited everyone, not just the wealthy or the well-connected. It was another rainy evening when Elon sat down to reflect on the journey so far. He wasn't finished yet, there was still so much to do, but he was beginning to see the true purpose of his work. He had spent his life redefining the impossible, but now he was rethinking what that truly meant. Perhaps the real impossible feat was not reaching Mars or creating the perfect battery. It was bringing everyone along on that journey. Ensuring that no one was left behind. That was the new challenge, and one that Elon Musk had never been more ready to face. After years of pushing the envelope, Elon Musk had arrived at a pivotal moment in his journey. He had revolutionized industries, inspired millions, and set a course for humanity to reach for the stars. But as the weight of his decisions grew heavier, one truth became clear: technological progress alone wasn't enough. Trust was the missing element, and it was one that could not be bought, sold, or manufactured. It had to be earned. Elon's relationship with the public had always been complicated. His bold statements, erratic tweets, and ambitious goals had drawn both admiration and skepticism. His unwavering confidence in his ability to solve the world's most complex problems had earned him a legion of fans, but it had also earned him detractors. For every breakthrough, there seemed to be a misstep or a controversial statement that set back his progress. But now, as he reflected on the next phase of his mission, he realized something: the future of his companies, and perhaps even the future of humanity, depended on something far more important than innovation. It depended on trust. The catalyst for this realization came during a routine visit to a Tesla showroom in Los Angeles. Elon was greeted warmly by the staff, but there was an underlying tension in the air. As he walked through the showroom, he noticed that many of the customers were hesitant. They looked at the cars with admiration, but there was a certain skepticism in their eyes. It wasn't just about the product, it was about the company, and more specifically, about Elon Musk himself. One of the sales representatives, a young woman named Maria, approached him with a polite smile. "Mr. Musk, it's an honor to meet you. We're all huge fans of what you've accomplished." Elon smiled back, but there was an unease in his stomach. He had spent years building the Tesla brand, and yet he could feel that something was missing. The trust he had once commanded had begun to fray. "Thank you, Maria, Elon replied, his voice thoughtful. But I'm starting to think that we've done more than just build great products. We need to rebuild trust with the people who believe in us. Maria gave him a knowing look. I think you're right. There's a lot of talk these days about things that have happened with the company. It's not easy to keep the momentum going when people are starting to question your every move. Elon nodded, the weight of her words settling in. He had always prided himself on his ability to innovate, to be at the forefront of every major technological shift. But now, he realized that he couldn't just keep forging ahead without addressing the growing concerns from the public. Tesla, SpaceX, and even his personal reputation were built on more than just technology. They were built on people's belief in what he could do, and more importantly, in his ability to follow through on his promises. Over the next few weeks, Elon began to take a hard look at his approach to leadership. He realized that his tendency to make bold, sweeping statements had sometimes alienated the very people he needed on his side. His tweets, while often humorous or insightful, had occasionally caused panic or confusion. The public's perception of him had been shaped by his actions and words, some of which had been out of sync with his intentions. It was time for a change. Elon reached out to his leadership teams across both Tesla and SpaceX and initiated a series of meetings designed to tackle one question: how could they rebuild trust with the public, investors, and customers? He started with transparency. It was time for the public to hear directly from him, in a way that was open, honest, and free from the distractions of social media. The first step was to hold a series of press conferences, not just for Tesla and SpaceX, but for every project he was involved in. Elon knew that one of the biggest obstacles to rebuilding trust was the secrecy that had surrounded many of his ventures. It was easy for critics to accuse him of being a genius without a plan, a visionary without the follow-through. But he wanted to prove that his vision was rooted in more than just ambition, it was rooted in accountability. At the first press conference, Elon stood before a crowd of journalists, investors, and employees. His tone was calm, but the weight of the moment was unmistakable. He began by acknowledging the public's concerns about his leadership style and the challenges his companies had faced. I want to start by saying this: I know that many of you have questions about where we're going, what we're doing, and how we're going to get there, Elon said, looking directly into the camera. I've always been someone who believed in going after the big, impossible challenges. But I also understand that sometimes, in the rush to make progress, we lose sight of the people who matter most, the people who have supported us, the customers who trust us, and the employees who work tirelessly to make our vision a reality. He paused, allowing the words to sink in. I want you all to know that I'm committed to being more transparent, to being more accountable, and to making sure that everything we do, from the design of our cars to the rockets we send to space, is done with the utmost integrity. We will not rush, we will not cut corners, and we will make sure that everything we do aligns with our mission, to make the world a better place for everyone. The room fell silent. There was a collective sense of relief, as if the weight of uncertainty had finally been lifted. In the weeks that followed, Elon kept his promise. He made himself available to the press more often, answering difficult questions with honesty and humility. He took the time to listen to the concerns of his customers, whether they were reaching out through social media or speaking directly to him at Tesla stores. One afternoon, as he sat down for another Q&A with the press, he was asked about the future of SpaceX and the timeline for Mars colonization. The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. We've always said that Mars is the next frontier, Elon began, but the truth is, we're not going to rush to Mars just for the sake of it. We're going to make sure that we have the technology, the resources, and the support we need to do it safely. We will only go when the time is right, and we will be transparent about every step of the journey. The reporters nodded, appreciative of his forthrightness. In the months that followed, Elon saw a shift in public perception. People began to trust him again, not because of the promises he made, but because of the actions he took to back them up. Tesla's sales began to climb, SpaceX launched successful missions with increasing regularity, and his personal brand, though still polarizing, regained a measure of the respect it had once commanded. But it wasn't just about his companies. Elon realized that trust, once lost, was one of the hardest things to rebuild. It took time, effort, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right, not just what was easy. One quiet evening, as Elon sat in his office reflecting on the journey, he received a message from Grimes. It was simple but profound: "You did it. You brought us back." Elon smiled. He hadn't just rebuilt trust with the public. He had rebuilt trust with himself. Elon Musk had spent his life chasing the impossible. He had battled skepticism, rejection, and even failure in pursuit of his dreams. Now, with his companies back on track and the public's trust renewed, he realized that the real challenge was not in achieving greatness, but in sustaining it. For the first time in a long while, Elon felt a sense of calm. The world was watching, yes, but he had learned an important lesson: progress wasn't always about rushing toward the next milestone. Sometimes, it was about taking the time to reflect, to recalibrate, and to prepare for the long journey ahead. It was an overcast morning when Elon sat down with his leadership teams at both Tesla and SpaceX. The purpose of this meeting was different from the countless others that had come before. This time, the conversation wasn't about expanding, innovating, or pushing boundaries, it was about resilience. "We've been fortunate," Elon began, his voice measured but firm. "But we can't assume that the road ahead will always be smooth. There will be obstacles, setbacks, and challenges, many of them out of our control. The question is, how will we handle them when they come?" The room fell silent as everyone listened intently. Elon had always been a man of action, of grand ideas, but today he was speaking about something more personal. This was about navigating the difficult realities of running companies on the cutting edge of technology. "We've faced a lot already," Elon continued. "From supply chain issues to production delays, to moments when we didn't know if we could even meet our own expectations. But we've always kept going. We've overcome it, and we will continue to." The conversation turned to logistics, to expanding Tesla's reach into new markets and boosting SpaceX's capacity to send more missions into space. But amid these discussions of strategy, there was a palpable sense of caution. Everyone knew that Elon wasn't just thinking about business. He was thinking about the future, and more importantly, how to safeguard it. Later that day, Elon found himself alone in his office, staring out the window at the sprawling view of the Tesla factory in Fremont, California. It had been nearly 2 decades since he had first taken the reins at Tesla, and yet the road ahead felt as uncertain as it had back then. The electric car market was no longer a niche, it was rapidly becoming the future of transportation. And while that was exhilarating, it also meant facing new pressures and competition. He thought about the long hours, the challenges, the moments when it had seemed like everything was falling apart. There had been times when it felt like SpaceX or Tesla would crumble under the weight of their ambition. But they hadn't. And now, he had to ensure that they didn't just survive, but thrived, for decades to come. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Tesla's production numbers soared, but so did its challenges. Raw materials became increasingly difficult to secure, and the push for renewable energy required new levels of collaboration with governments and industries around the world. Elon threw himself into these issues, working relentlessly to find solutions and keep his companies ahead of the curve. Meanwhile, SpaceX was dealing with its own set of hurdles. Although the Mars mission was progressing, unforeseen technical difficulties arose. A key component of the Starship rocket, a part that Elon had personally overseen, had failed during a test flight, causing a significant delay. It was a devastating setback, not just for SpaceX, but for Elon personally. The news quickly spread. Media outlets were quick to point out the failure, citing it as evidence that Elon's ambitious vision might be too far-fetched. It was the kind of criticism he had learned to tune out over the years, but this time, it stung. The weight of the setback wasn't just a blow to SpaceX's reputation, it felt like a blow to the entire space industry's credibility. Elon spent hours reviewing the data, analyzing every failure point, and even taking responsibility for the setback. His team had rallied behind him, offering solutions, but he knew that in order to move forward, he had to face this challenge head-on. It was then that he realized something crucial: progress wasn't just about grand successes. It was also about overcoming the failures, learning from them, and persevering when the odds were stacked against him. The next few days were filled with intense work at both Tesla and SpaceX. Elon restructured the way both companies would approach setbacks, introducing more rigorous testing and establishing a culture of open dialogue about failure. He gathered his teams together, not to reprimand them, but to focus on the future. "I want to remind everyone that failure is not the end," he told his teams during a company-wide meeting. "It's a step along the way. And as long as we learn from it and adapt, it will never be in vain." Elon's message was clear: there would be many more challenges in the road ahead, but it was how they handled those challenges that would define their success. It wasn't about avoiding failure, it was about using failure as a springboard for improvement. But while the business challenges were immense, Elon was also dealing with personal matters. As the pressure continued to mount from every direction, his personal life began to suffer. The constant travel, the long hours, and the emotional toll of running such high-stakes companies had taken a toll on his relationships. His connection with Grimes, once a source of personal stability, had started to strain under the weight of his ambition. The difficulties in his personal life only added to the pressure he felt in his professional one. He had always been able to compartmentalize his personal and professional worlds, but now, the lines were blurring. It wasn't just the public who was watching, it was also his family, his friends, and the people who had once believed in him as more than just a businessman. He was at a crossroads. The long road ahead wasn't just about technology or space exploration. It was also about understanding how to balance his vision with the people he cared about most. The relentless pursuit of progress had come at a cost, and it was becoming clear that sustaining his vision required more than just endless work. It required self-awareness, compassion, and humility. One evening, after a particularly tough day, Elon sat down with his children. They had been asking questions about Mars, about space travel, and about the future. "Dad," his youngest son asked, "when are we going to live on Mars?" Elon smiled softly, his exhaustion melting away in the warmth of their presence. "Not yet, buddy," he said. "But we're working on it. And when the time is right, we'll all go together." His son's face lit up. "Really? We're going to Mars?" Elon laughed. "Maybe. But first, we need to make sure the Earth is in good shape." As the conversation turned to lighter topics, Elon realized something important: the long road ahead wasn't just about technology, or Mars, or rockets. It was about legacy, the kind of future he wanted to build not just for himself, but for his children, for the world, and for generations to come. The road was long. But it was worth every step. Elon Musk had always been a man of extremes. He had built his empire on the idea that pushing boundaries could change the world, and in many ways, it had. Tesla had revolutionized the automotive industry, SpaceX was making strides toward Mars, and Neuralink was bringing the promise of a neural interface closer to reality. But with all that success came an undeniable truth: Elon's influence was no longer confined to just the tech world. It was rippling through every corner of society. Every decision Elon made, every tweet he sent, every public appearance he gave seemed to send shockwaves across the globe. The world was watching, and as his profile grew, so did the scrutiny. The tech mogul was no longer just a visionary, he had become a symbol, a lightning rod for both admiration and criticism. It wasn't just about the companies anymore. It was about Elon Musk, the man behind the ideas. People looked to him not only for innovation but for answers about the future of humanity, the environment, and even the future of technology itself. It was a chilly morning in late autumn when Elon sat in a crowded boardroom with his top executives. The mood in the room was tense. It wasn't just another meeting about sales numbers or production timelines. This was about the broader impact of his companies, and it was clear that the stakes were higher than ever before. "We've seen growth," said Gwynne Shotwell, president of SpaceX, "but we've also seen an increase in the pressure on us, on you. The expectations have never been higher. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. I understand. The world expects us to be perfect, but the truth is, no one is. We make mistakes, but we learn from them. Gwyn nodded, but her expression remained serious. It's more than that. The impact of your actions is felt far beyond the walls of Tesla and SpaceX. People look at us as a model for the future. And that's a responsibility we can't take lightly. Elon had always known that his companies and his personal brand were interwoven. But now, as the years passed, the weight of that responsibility was growing heavier. Every innovation, every new initiative, every challenge he faced was viewed through a microscope. There were always risks to the planet, risks to society, and risks to his own reputation. And with all those risks, there were consequences. The ripple effect wasn't always positive. As Tesla's popularity grew, so did the backlash. Environmentalists, once his strongest supporters, began to criticize the company for the environmental impact of its battery production. Social justice advocates raised concerns about the treatment of workers in Tesla's factories. Meanwhile, SpaceX's continued progress in space exploration led to discussions about the ethics of colonizing other planets when so many problems remained unsolved on Earth. Elon found himself at the center of these debates, fielding accusations from every side. He was accused of being a corporate tycoon who cared more about profits than people. Others argued that his ambitions were too far-reaching, that humanity's focus should be on solving problems here on Earth before venturing out into space. It wasn't just the external pressure that weighed on Elon. The ripple effect was being felt within his personal life as well. His relationship with Grimes had continued to fluctuate, with both of them struggling to find balance amid the growing chaos of their careers. Their shared dream of changing the world often clashed with the reality of their personal lives, and it had started to take a toll on their connection. Elon had always been driven by a singular vision of the future, but that vision had started to feel lonely. Despite being surrounded by a team of brilliant people, despite the millions of supporters around the world, Elon often felt isolated. The burden of being the face of a movement that was shaping the world's future was heavier than he had anticipated. One night, after a particularly intense week of press conferences and high-stakes meetings, Elon sat in his office, staring at the screen of his computer. The latest article about Tesla's environmental impact was being shared by thousands of people, many of whom were once his biggest supporters. The words hit him harder than he cared to admit. Is Elon Musk's vision for the future damaging the world he's trying to save? It wasn't the first time he had been criticized, and it wouldn't be the last. But this one felt different. It wasn't just about Tesla's product or SpaceX's goals. It was about whether his entire mission, his lifelong dream, was even worth it if it came at such a high cost. The pressure of being at the forefront of the world's biggest technological advancements weighed on him, and with that weight came a series of difficult decisions. Elon knew that in order to continue pushing forward, he would need to address the consequences of his actions, not just in terms of his companies, but in terms of his impact on society as a whole. He spent hours, days, in deep reflection, trying to discern the right path forward. He consulted with experts in various fields, ethicists, economists, environmentalists, seeking their perspectives on how to balance innovation with social responsibility. It wasn't an easy task, but it was necessary. During one of these consultations, a prominent environmental scientist named Dr. Emily Hayes, who had once praised Tesla for its innovation, told Elon bluntly, "You're playing the long game, Elon. But the short-term consequences, especially with your batteries, are real. You're trying to change the world, but sometimes it feels like you're ignoring the very people you're trying to help." Elon took a deep breath. He had heard this criticism before, but something about Dr. Hayes' words hit differently. It wasn't just about making progress, it was about making sure that the progress was sustainable, ethical, and beneficial to everyone, not just those who could afford to buy an electric car or take part in space exploration. As the weeks passed, Elon made a conscious effort to adjust his approach. He started focusing more on the intersection of technology and ethics, and he made sure that Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures were not only transparent but also accountable to the public. His companies launched initiatives aimed at improving the environmental impact of battery production, and he pushed for more collaboration with scientists and researchers to ensure that space exploration didn't come at the expense of Earth's well-being. But the ripple effect was undeniable. Elon had stirred something in the world, a sense of urgency, a desire to break free from the limitations of the present and reach for a better future. Yet, with that came the responsibility to address the consequences of those actions. The world was watching, and Elon Musk knew that with every step forward, there would be more ripple effects, some good, some bad. But it was all part of the journey. And for better or worse, it was a journey he couldn't turn back from. Elon Musk had always prided himself on his ability to keep pushing forward, no matter how difficult the road. For years, he had been the unstoppable force behind Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and more. But recently, the weight of his ambitions had become harder to bear. Every day, it seemed like the world was expecting more from him, and the pressure was mounting. In the quiet of the early morning, Elon sat in his office, staring at his phone. His emails, once a source of connection and business opportunities, now felt like an endless stream of demands and crises. Tesla's stock had taken a hit after a disappointing earnings report. A SpaceX mission had been delayed, again. And Neuralink's progress was slower than anticipated, with some critics questioning whether the company could ever live up to its lofty promises. Elon was exhausted. Physically, mentally, emotionally. He had been running at full speed for years, and the toll it had taken was starting to show. His relationships were strained, his health had declined, and the constant pressure of living in the public eye was beginning to wear him down. The morning sun cast long shadows across the room, but it didn't provide the comfort it once had. Elon had reached a point where even his passion for changing the world seemed overshadowed by the overwhelming demands on his time and energy. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Grimes, one of the few people in his life who could reach him beyond the world of business. "Are you okay? I haven't heard from you in days." Elon stared at the message for a long moment, unsure of how to respond. They had been through ups and downs in their relationship, but lately, it felt like they were on different paths. He couldn't help but wonder if he had lost sight of the very thing that had brought them together, his ability to balance his mission with the people he loved. He typed a quick response, but before he could send it, a series of notifications popped up on his screen, more work emails, a social media comment calling him a fraud, and yet another article questioning whether his companies were doing more harm than good. Elon had been used to the criticism, even welcomed it at times, but now, it felt like an avalanche. It was no longer just about ideas and innovations, it was personal. Every mistake, every failure, every misstep felt like a judgment on his entire existence. He felt suffocated, isolated in a way he hadn't felt before. The phone rang. It was Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX. "Hey, Elon, I know things are tough right now, but we need to talk about the Mars project. The team is waiting for your input." Elon could hear the urgency in her voice, but it only added to his sense of overwhelm. Mars. The very dream that had once driven him to work tirelessly. The dream that had inspired him to defy the odds, to push the boundaries of what was possible. And now, it felt like a distant fantasy. He had become so consumed by the demands of the present that the vision for the future seemed to slip further away. "I'll get to it," Elon muttered, trying to sound like he was in control, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew he wasn't fooling anyone, especially not Gwynne. She paused before responding. "Elon, I think it's time for you to take a break. You can't keep pushing like this. I know you want to change the world, but if you burn out, it won't help anyone." Elon felt a pang of frustration. A break? That was the last thing he could afford. There was so much at stake. How could he take a break when the world was depending on him? How could he rest when there was still so much to accomplish? "I don't have time for that," he replied, his voice strained. "Elon," she said gently, "you can't pour from an empty cup. If you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to do any of this. Sometimes the best thing you can do for the world is to take a step back and recharge. Trust me on this. The conversation ended, but the words lingered in his mind. A break. It felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. And yet, deep down, he knew she was right. He was burning out, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the pressure was taking its toll. The days that followed were a blur. Elon attended meetings, pushed forward with initiatives, and continued to juggle the overwhelming responsibilities of running multiple companies. But each day, the weight of it all grew heavier. He was becoming numb to the very things that had once inspired him: Tesla's success, SpaceX's achievements, Neuralink's breakthroughs. They all seemed like distant victories that no longer brought him the joy they once had. He could feel himself reaching his breaking point. Then, one evening, as he sat alone in his office, staring at a whiteboard covered in plans for the future, Elon had a moment of clarity. It was as if the fog that had clouded his mind finally lifted. He didn't need to do it all. He didn't need to change the world in one fell swoop. The pressure to achieve everything at once, to be everything to everyone, had clouded his vision. What he needed was a shift in perspective, a change in how he approached his mission. Elon picked up his phone and called Gwyn. "I think you're right," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been pushing too hard. I need to step back, even if it's just for a little while." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Gwyn replied, "I'm glad to hear that, Elon. I think this is the first step in the right direction." For the first time in a long while, Elon felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't about giving up, it was about recognizing that taking care of himself was just as important as taking care of his companies. Without balance, without mental clarity, none of his big ideas would matter. In the days that followed, Elon began to slow down. He spent more time with his children, reconnecting with the people who mattered most. He took walks in nature, meditated, and allowed himself to step away from the constant barrage of emails and notifications. It wasn't an easy adjustment, but it was a necessary one. And as he took the time to recharge, something inside him began to change. He realized that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but he couldn't navigate them if he wasn't whole himself. He had reached his breaking point, but now he was rebuilding. The days after his decision to step back were some of the most difficult but transformative of Elon Musk's life. The first few days, he did nothing but rest, sleeping late, walking around his home, and spending time with his children. It was a strange feeling, not constantly being tied to his devices, not rushing from one meeting to the next. But as he started to feel the effects of this temporary reprieve, something began to shift in his perspective. In the past, he had always believed that the future of humanity depended on him. The weight of this belief had driven him relentlessly, but it had also blinded him to the importance of balance. Now, with his energy restored and his mind clearer than it had been in years, he began to see things differently. His phone buzzed with a new notification, another article about Tesla's recent developments, another round of social media reactions about his latest endeavors. For a brief moment, he felt the old urge to dive back into work. But instead of reacting impulsively, he took a deep breath and put the phone down. It was time for a change. He needed a renewed vision, not just for his companies, but for his life. He had been so consumed by the demands of his work that he had forgotten the very thing that had inspired him in the first place, the desire to help humanity move forward, not just technologically, but holistically. The first step toward this new vision came when he called a meeting with his closest advisors. As he walked into the conference room, he could see the tension in the air. They had all been waiting for him to return to the helm, expecting business as usual. But Elon had other plans. "I've been thinking," he began, pacing slowly in front of the room, "about the future of Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and all the other projects we've started. But more importantly, I've been thinking about the future of all of us, our future as a species. We've been pushing for progress at a breakneck speed, but we need to take a step back. It's time to focus on sustainability, responsibility, and collaboration. There was a silence in the room as his team processed his words. Elon could feel their skepticism, but he also knew that this was a conversation they needed to have. "We've made a lot of progress in creating groundbreaking technologies," he continued, "but the truth is, we've often done it at the expense of the present, of people's well-being, of the environment, and even of our own lives. I'm tired of being viewed as just a tech mogul. I want to be remembered for changing the world in a way that benefits everyone, not just those who can afford to invest in the future." Over the next few weeks, Elon began reshaping his company's priorities. Tesla's focus shifted from just increasing production to improving the sustainability of their operations, from the materials used in their batteries to the efficiency of their energy systems. SpaceX began collaborating more closely with global space agencies to ensure that their mission to Mars was part of a broader, more international effort. Neuralink, which had been criticized for its ambitious promises, refocused its research to ensure that its technologies were not only innovative but ethical and accessible to all. Elon also made a series of personal decisions that were just as impactful. He made time for his family, reconnecting with Grimes and finding a new balance in their relationship. He attended his children's school events, spent weekends hiking, and even started exploring his artistic side again, something he had neglected for years. He realized that in order to lead with purpose, he needed to be whole himself. One of the most important changes came when he publicly addressed his need for a more holistic approach to innovation. During a press conference, Elon Musk spoke candidly about the challenges he had faced over the past few years, the toll it had taken on his personal life, his health, and his sense of purpose. "I've spent so many years focused on achieving the impossible that I've lost sight of the bigger picture," he admitted to the audience. "I've realized that true progress doesn't come from working harder or faster, it comes from understanding that we're all part of the same system. The future isn't just about technology, it's about the people, the planet, and the way we connect with one another." The response was overwhelming. Critics who had once questioned his motives now praised his vulnerability and the new direction he was taking. Supporters rallied behind him, eager to see how this new vision would shape the future of his companies and, ultimately, the world. Elon's renewed vision also had a ripple effect beyond his companies. His shift in focus inspired a movement within the tech industry. Other CEOs began following suit, recognizing the importance of sustainability, collaboration, and the well-being of society. Even his competitors in the electric vehicle market took note, investing more in renewable energy and ethical production practices. But Elon was not looking for accolades or recognition. His newfound clarity wasn't about accolades, it was about leaving a legacy that truly mattered. It was about ensuring that the technological advancements he championed didn't come at the cost of humanity's well-being. One evening, while sitting in his living room, Elon reflected on how far he had come. He thought about the times when he had been close to breaking, the moments when his vision had seemed too grand, too impossible. But now, for the first time in a long time, he felt grounded. He felt like he was on the right path, not just as a tech mogul, but as someone who genuinely cared about the future of humanity. His children were playing in the next room, and he could hear their laughter. Grimes was sitting beside him, and for the first time in months, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. There was peace, a sense of purpose that came from knowing that he was not just building a future, but nurturing the relationships and values that would make that future worth living. As Elon looked toward the horizon, he knew the road ahead would still be challenging. There would be obstacles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face them, not as a man driven by the need to conquer, but as a man driven by a sense of purpose that extended beyond himself. This was the renewed vision he had been searching for. A vision of progress that wasn't just about technology, but about humanity, sustainability, and connection. And this time, he was determined to follow it to the end. Elon Musk had always believed in the impossible. He had transformed Tesla from a fledgling company into a leader in electric vehicles, revolutionized space travel with SpaceX, and sparked dreams of a future where humanity was not just confined to Earth, but exploring the stars. Mars, the red planet, had been his ultimate goal for as long as he could remember. But as he stared at the plans laid out before him, he realized the road to Mars was more daunting than ever. SpaceX had made significant strides, Starship was now capable of reaching Mars, and the first uncrewed missions were set to launch in the next year. But Elon's new approach to leadership had shifted his focus. He wasn't just thinking about getting people to Mars, he was thinking about the long-term sustainability of the project. How could humanity thrive on Mars without repeating the mistakes of Earth? He had always been driven by a sense of urgency, the belief that time was running out for Earth. But now, he was taking a step back, considering the broader implications. Colonizing Mars wasn't just about exploration. It was about survival, about ensuring that humanity had a backup plan in case Earth's fragile ecosystem continued to deteriorate. Sitting in his office in Hawthorne, California, Elon looked out at the sprawling SpaceX campus. The buzz of activity around him reminded him of how much had been accomplished, but the pressure of what lay ahead felt more intense than ever. Elon had come a long way from the man who had pushed tirelessly without consideration for his personal life. Now, as he prepared for the next major step in human space exploration, he felt the weight of responsibility. Mars wasn't just a goal, it was a lifeline. But to succeed, SpaceX needed to address challenges that no company had ever faced before. The technology was there, but the logistics, the human factors, and the long-term sustainability were the unknowns. He gathered his team in the large conference room. Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president, was already there, along with several of his top engineers and scientists. They had been working day and night on the Mars project, but even with all their expertise, the challenges ahead felt insurmountable. "We've made incredible progress," Elon began, "but we're approaching the most difficult part of this mission. The first missions will be unmanned, yes, but soon enough, we'll need to send people to Mars, and keep them alive. That's the most critical part." Gwynne nodded. "We've made advancements in rocket technology, life support systems, and energy production. But we still don't know everything. And if we're going to build a self-sustaining colony, we need to think beyond just the technology. What about the people? How will they adapt?" Elon paused. "I've been thinking about that a lot. In fact, I've been thinking about Earth, too. We're building technology to make Mars habitable, but we're not focusing enough on making Earth sustainable. Maybe we've been so focused on leaving Earth that we haven't done enough to ensure we can stay here." There was silence in the room as his words hung in the air. The truth was undeniable. SpaceX's mission to Mars was incredible, but it couldn't ignore the reality that humanity needed to change its relationship with the planet. Elon had always believed in the power of technology to solve the world's problems, but he now saw that the solution was bigger than any one company or idea. In the weeks that followed, Elon started making changes at SpaceX. The Mars mission continued at full speed, but he pushed the team to incorporate sustainable practices into every aspect of the project. What if they could not only make Mars habitable, but make the journey to Mars itself as sustainable as possible? Could they create closed-loop systems that minimized waste? Could the technology they used on Mars be applied to Earth to solve problems like water scarcity or energy consumption? Elon also started reaching out to other leaders in the space and sustainability industries. His renewed vision for the future of humanity didn't stop at SpaceX. He began to build coalitions with scientists, environmentalists, and even competitors, recognizing that the only way forward was to collaborate. The road to Mars was a monumental task, but the road to a sustainable future for both Earth and Mars required collective effort. Despite his changing perspective, the pressure of the Mars mission still weighed heavily on Elon. The logistics were daunting, transporting humans to Mars, setting up the infrastructure for a self-sustaining colony, and addressing the psychological effects of long-term space travel. How would people handle the isolation, the confinement, the endless distance from Earth? What would life be like in a world where everything, from food to water to oxygen, would need to be produced locally? These were questions that haunted Elon's mind in the quiet moments. There was no easy answer. Mars was unforgiving, and the risks were immense. But he had always believed that humanity's greatest achievements came from pushing the limits of what was possible, from facing the unknown with courage and determination. Mars was the next frontier. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Elon sat in his office, staring at a model of Starship on his desk. It was an awe-inspiring piece of engineering, a testament to the ambition that had driven him all these years. But as he looked at it, he felt something else, a sense of responsibility. Not just for the technology, but for the future of humanity. He thought about the people who would be the first to set foot on Mars. They would face unimaginable challenges, but they would also be pioneers, the first to establish a foothold on another planet. They would have to rely on each other, their skills, and the technologies SpaceX had developed. Elon realized that their survival wasn't just about the hardware, it was about the human spirit, the desire to push through adversity, to create something greater than themselves. And so, he began to reframe the mission. Mars wasn't just a backup plan for humanity, it was an opportunity to reimagine what it meant to be human, to build a society not bound by the mistakes of the past, but free to create something new. A society where technology, sustainability, and collaboration were the foundation of a thriving future. Elon Musk had always been a man of vision, but now, more than ever, he understood that vision wasn't just about looking to the stars, it was about bringing the best of humanity with him. The road to Mars was long and uncertain, but with a renewed sense of purpose, he was ready to lead the charge. The future of humanity was in his hands, but it wasn't just about getting to Mars, it was about ensuring that both Earth and Mars could become sustainable homes for generations to come. The day had come when Elon Musk found himself standing in front of a crowd of thousands at the unveiling of SpaceX's most advanced project yet. The massive new Starship rocket loomed behind him, a gleaming symbol of everything he had worked for. This moment should have felt like the pinnacle of his achievements, the realization of a dream he had pursued for decades. Yet, as he stood there, addressing the eager crowd, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had always been driven by the idea of reaching Mars, of ensuring that humanity had a second home, just in case. He had devoted countless hours, sleepless nights, and unimaginable energy to making that dream a reality. But now, with the mission closer than ever, Elon was beginning to realize that his legacy wasn't going to be about a single technological achievement. It wasn't going to be defined by rockets, electric cars, or artificial intelligence. The legacy he was creating was about something much larger, something more profound. It was about the future of humanity itself. As Elon looked out at the audience, he thought about the long road that had brought him here. He remembered the countless challenges, the years of sleepless nights, the moments when success seemed impossible. He had always been the man who pushed forward, who ignored the doubts and the naysayers. But now, as he neared the end of one journey and the beginning of another, he felt a sense of humility he hadn't expected. His children, his greatest legacy, were watching from the front row. They were growing up in a world far different from the one he had known as a child. And as much as he had worked for their future, he now realized that the kind of world they would inherit would be shaped not only by the technology he created, but by the values he instilled in them. Today, Elon began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, we stand on the brink of a new era. The mission to make life multiplanetary is within reach, but it's not just about going to Mars. It's about creating a future where technology serves humanity, where progress is sustainable, and where we ensure that the planet we call home, our Earth, remains as a place we can all thrive on. There was a palpable silence in the crowd as his words resonated. It wasn't the typical SpaceX press conference. This wasn't just about launching rockets, this was about something far bigger. Something that transcended the technology they were building. Elon had always believed in the potential of technology to solve the world's problems, but over the past few years, his perspective had shifted. He had come to realize that the future wasn't just about creating new technologies, it was about understanding how those technologies would shape the future of humanity. Could we make space travel not just possible, but sustainable? Could we use the advancements of artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and renewable energy to ensure a better, more balanced future for Earth? He had started to see his work not as isolated projects but as part of a much larger mission, to help guide humanity toward a future that was both innovative and responsible. The goal of making Mars a second home for humanity was still there, but it wasn't just about escaping Earth's troubles. It was about creating a backup, yes, but also using that vision to inspire the world to rethink how we live on Earth. As he sat alone in his office later that evening, Elon reflected on the decisions he had made over the years. He had always been a man of extremes, pushing himself, his employees, and his companies to the edge of what was possible. There were moments he regretted, sacrifices he wished he hadn't made, and times when his obsession with his work had caused strain on his personal relationships. But there were also moments of clarity, the moments when he realized that his work wasn't just about the technology or the companies. It was about making a meaningful difference, not just for the world, but for his children, and for future generations. He had come to understand that legacy wasn't just about the marks you left on the world, it was about the people you influenced, the lives you touched, and the ripple effects your actions had long after you were gone. The Mars Project, Tesla, SpaceX, and even Neuralink, all of these were pieces of a much larger puzzle. But the true legacy he wanted to leave was a vision of a future where humanity learned to thrive sustainably, where technology was used to better the planet, not destroy it. As the years passed, Elon's focus on Mars continued, but his approach was more holistic than ever. SpaceX's Mars mission expanded to include global partnerships. The mission was no longer just an American endeavor, it was a global one, with contributions from space agencies, scientists, and engineers around the world. The first crewed missions to Mars were successful, but they were just the beginning. Elon ensured that sustainability was a core aspect of the colony's design. Renewable energy systems, water recycling technologies, and sustainable agriculture were at the forefront of every decision. On Earth, his focus shifted as well. Tesla led the way in renewable energy storage, while Solar City expanded to provide affordable solar power to communities across the globe. Elon used his influence to push for global environmental policies that incentivize the transition to clean energy, creating a world where fossil fuels were no longer the dominant source of power. One night, while walking through the SpaceX headquarters in Texas, Elon stopped to look out at the vast expanse of the landscape. The launch pads were quiet, the rockets standing tall in the night sky. He was no longer the same man who had once been obsessed with the idea of saving humanity through technology alone. Now, he understood that true progress came from collaboration, sustainability, and respect for the planet. His children, now older, had become part of the conversation. They had grown up surrounded by his projects, his ambitions, and his dreams. But what was most important was that they had grown up with the understanding that progress didn't have to come at the expense of the Earth. It was about balance. They understood, in their own ways, that they had a responsibility not just to themselves, but to the generations that would follow. And as Elon looked toward the stars, he knew that the road ahead would continue to be filled with challenges. Mars was still calling to him, but he no longer saw it as a mere escape. He saw it as part of a broader vision, a vision where humanity could build a future that embraced both the technology of tomorrow and the wisdom of today. His legacy would not just be the rockets he had launched or the cars he had made. It would be the knowledge that, in the end, true progress came from knowing when to push forward and when to step back. From knowing that the future of humanity depended not just on reaching the stars, but on ensuring that the Earth, the cradle of all life, was cared for. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?